Hello again, Vince here with a bit of a ramble and guide. Let's discuss how you as a new user to Linux might go about getting the help you may need to sort out any issues you may run into. I've based this on my own experience and also some nuggets of advice that I've heard. First, let's start by how you might help yourself. If you've come this far, then I presume that you've managed to install a Linux distro, but you might have come across some problem. The first thing you need to be aware of is the particular hardware that you are running. If you built your own computer, you may already know this, but this tip will still assist you in knowing what the Linux kernel may or may not be recognizing your hardware as. Particularly useful for when searching for information online. There are various ways to get information about your system, but probably the most popular way is the inxi command, as it works across all distros. This is especially useful for the purposes of asking questions in forums, which I'll cover later in this video. Your distro may have a graphical tool also for surveying the system's hardware, and you can surely use this. Most distros will have inxi installed, but if you find that it's missing, then your first task is to install it via the App Store or the package manager of your distro. The way you use it is quite simply in terminal, inxi dash capital F XZ. The F option gives you full output, X adds details, and Z hides identifying information like MAC, IP addresses, and host names. And so if we run this, here you'll find information on what kernel you're running, what CPU you're running, your GPU, graphics driver, network card, and lots of other stuff. There are other commands that you might find useful, and I'll list these in the video description, but there's lshw, which is similar to inxi but in a different format. There's lspci, which lists all your PCI devices. There's lsusb, which lists your USB devices, and there's xinput list, which lists all your input devices. Now that you've got your system information, we can go about refining your search technique, or Google foo as I tend to call it. It is highly likely that whatever problem you might be coming across, there is someone out there who has come across that same or very similar issue, and perhaps someone else has been kind enough to post a solution. I've found that you can save time in your search for answers if you can be as specific as you can. Let's try an example. So a common issue that some people might have is screen tearing. And you might want to also include your GPU. In my case, it's an RX 460. And either just typing in Linux or more specifically the distro you're using. So in my case, it would normally be Arco Linux, but you might be using Ubuntu 20.04. The reason why I mention the version number in the search is you may need to be wary of old information. That may not apply if a newer version of a distro has changed the way they handle certain things. So try to research the most up-to-date solution to your problem. In a rolling distribution like Arch-based, OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, or Solus, you may not have a version number, so just start by reading what looks like the most recent information on the problem you are having. Once you have your search results, you'll find that they tend to be either in the form of articles, blog posts, wiki pages, or forum posts. If there is a graphical user interface way of solving your problem, that's great. However, you will more than likely find that the vast majority of solutions will be based on running terminal commands. Don't be too afraid of this. There is a saying that you shouldn't just copy and paste terminal commands from some random website to be run on your system. It's often said in jest, but there is some truth to it. It's somewhat important that you have some idea of what the command will be doing on your system. You could end up doing real harm to your system, although the vast majority of the time it's fine. A good article or forum post like this one will have an explanation as to what the commands are doing. So for example, here it explains why you're running the commands that you are running. Don't be too worried if initially you really don't comprehend exactly what's going on. In time, you will gather more and more knowledge, just like the first few times you learn anything. However, just be a little cautious and use some common sense, especially with where you might be getting your information from. So wiki pages are another common search result, and this brings me to the venerable Arch Wiki. This is probably one of the most comprehensive guides around for a Linux distro. It is one that I very much often refer to. A word of caution, it's generally aimed at the slightly more technically adept user. You do need to read it fairly carefully to get the most out of it. Don't be afraid of it though, as it is a very valuable resource. Even when I'm not running an Arch-based distro, quite often I'll find something in the Arch Wiki that explains the precise problem I'm having, and though it may not immediately solve said problem, it commonly gives me enough clues to lead me down the right path that does solve it. Don't be thinking that this is the only valuable wiki, however, because Debian also has a fantastic wiki, as does OpenSUSE. Some of these are easier to read than others, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. Also, other distributions have fantastic documentation, like MX Linux and Solus, that may not be in the form of a wiki. Finally, in terms of searching for answers, you will most likely come across forums. These will be posts written by developers and users for questions that might be asked. If you find that your question has already been answered at some point, then great. You're also welcome to sign into forums and ask questions yourself. They are there for that specific purpose. Quite often, when you ask a question, particularly if it's hardware related, you might be asked back, what kind of system are you running? And this is where the inxi command I showed you earlier comes in handy. There are some important points to remember when joining a forum. First of all, find the rules page and read them. Most forums have them. Next, try to keep in mind that the vast majority of free and open source software is maintained and supported by volunteers who donate time out of their lives because they love to do so. Just like you might ask for help in real life, if you approach it in an appreciative and humble way, I can almost guarantee that you will get much better responses from fellow forum members, and you may even get someone going the extra mile for you to help solve your problem. If the first post from you that another forum member sees is someone jumping in and demanding answers, then how motivated do you think they will be to continue helping, or just switch off and do almost anything else in their busy lives? It's also expected to some extent that you have tried some things yourself prior to asking a question, whether it be that your search on the internet has yielded no results, or that certain fixes you've tried haven't worked. Explain these to people on the forum. However, don't get too hung up if you aren't that technically proficient. Explain that also if it is the case. Most reasonable forums are understanding that people are arriving at all different levels of knowledge. There are plenty of friendly and supportive forums out there. Some of the ones I've personally come across are the Ubuntu forums, Linux Mint, Peppermint forums, Manjaro, MX Linux, and Solus forums. Find the one for your distro and start there. Just like in real life, if you come across anyone being dismissive or snarky, feel free to ignore them, though this is definitely in the minority I've found. Some distros will also have more real-time discussion formats like these Telegram and Discord groups for my daily driver distribution Arco Linux. And this brings me finally to the community aspects of Linux and more broadly open source software. Remember, all this stuff has been made by people coming together with a shared goal and passion. The operating system and software is indeed great, but it really comes alive if you start immersing yourself in the communities that come along with it. You'll find help, discover new ways of doing things, learn something that you might not otherwise have found yourself, and maybe even make yourself a new friend or two. One of the first communities I came across was Switch to Linux. Because of his tutorials and videos on lots of different distros, I was able to get a foothold in my current Linux journey. His YouTube channel also produces a lot of privacy and security related content, which by its nature can at times be controversial, but Switched is a genuine and a good guy. He and his community are always willing to help, as they did for me when I've had questions. Another great YouTube channel is Joe Collins, who specifically targets much of his content to new users and fostering a friendly community. He also runs a fantastic forum called Easy Linux. Total OS today is also very welcoming for new users. There's a lot of focus here on putting the fun back into computing and Linux with TOS. Next up is one of the champions of the Linux community, the Destination Linux Network. Michael, Ryan, and Noah put out a great podcast called Destination Linux, as well as each of them producing their own content on their channels and making various other podcasts. There's also Jason Evangelo of Forbes magazine fame, who produces his own podcast and videos called Linux for Everyone. They are each super knowledgeable, and as you can see at the top of the page, there are plenty of ways you can join the community and discussion. I've also noticed they're producing a new website called Front Page Linux that has news and written tutorials. It makes for fantastic reading. Now, moving on to one of the most welcoming communities, which has got to be Big Daddy Linux, or BIDL as it's affectionately known. There are weekly shows that anyone can join in on in Zoom or simply in chat. Everyone there is super friendly, and the Big Daddy himself, Rocco, is ever the gentleman at making people feel welcome in the discussion. If you can't make it to the show, there are plenty of other ways you can join the community if you check out his website. Of course, you can't talk about friendly communities without mentioning Steve's very own here. His is a smaller channel thus far, but he focuses on doing a lot of live streams and being very welcoming to newcomers. You can tell how much he enjoys engaging with the community and how much he loves doing so. It's a very friendly place to ask questions. Once you join some of these communities, you will then discover other people producing great edutaining content who are also part of these communities, such as DistroTube's Next Level Stuff. He too has a friendly and welcoming community. However, it doesn't stop there. There's English Bob for gaming shenanigans, Sudo Reboot, PCTLC, DJWare, The Linux Experiment, Infinitely Galactic, and many more people who I apologize for not mentioning, otherwise I'll be stuck here forever. These are all people creating fantastic content and fostering great communities to help users. It is just a sampling of the ones I've found welcoming, friendly, and supportive, as there are many more. They are great places to get help, learn, and meet like-minded people. I think I'll finish up the video now, but before I go, I will invite you to join me and many others in any of the aforementioned communities to continue the conversation. Hit me up also in the comments below. What other ways have you found help in Linux? Any questions or suggestions for me? Hit subscribe if you would like to follow my content, and I'll see you next time. Bye.